Investigators were back at the Nancy Guthrie home today with the most visible activity we've seen in days, and this coming just a day after the family increased.
Earlier today, in that doorway we keep talking about, Nancy Guthrie's doorway right behind me.
An 84-year-old woman's disappearance has uncovered claims that she may have been living a double life for decades. Nancy Guthrie lived quietly in Tucson, Arizona, near the Santa Catalina Mountains, known for her faith and church routine. But after she vanished on February 1st, 2026, new details began to surface that have completely changed how people see her past. Was Nancy Guthrie really the person everyone thought she was? And what evidence suggests a hidden life spanning 30 years? Join us as we uncover how Nancy Guthrie's double life was exposed and what no one knew until now. The woman everyone thought they knew. Nancy Ellen Long was born on January 27, 1942, in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She grew up in Cincinnati and attended the University of Kentucky, where she was not just a student, but a working journalist, contributing to the school's student newspaper, the Kentucky Kernel, as a society editor and staff member. That detail is worth pausing on for a moment because it tells you something important about the kind of woman she was long before anyone outside her family paid any attention to her. She was curious, organized, and engaged with the world. She wrote things down. She covered the community she was part of. And decades later, her daughter would do exactly the same thing on one of the largest platforms in American media. She met Charles Guthrie at a University of Kentucky basketball game on a blind date that clearly delivered on its promise. Savannah Guthrie has told the story multiple times on the Today Show, describing how her mother watched her father walk up to the door of her sorority house, took one look at him, and made a decision on the spot. She was going to marry that man. That kind of certainty, the ability to look at something and know immediately what it is worth, is a quality that runs through every account of who Nancy was as a person. Charles was a mining engineer, and his work took the family far from Kentucky. The couple lived in Melbourne, Australia, for a period, which is where Savannah was born. They eventually settled in Tucson, Arizona, in the early 1970s, moving into a home in the Catalina foothills neighborhood near the base of the mountains that would become the backdrop for the rest of Nancy's life. She raised her 3 children there: Savannah, Annie, and Cameron. She built her community there. She joined her church there. And she stayed there even when the circumstances of her life changed completely. In June 1988, Charles Guthrie died suddenly of a heart attack during a mining trip to Mexico. He was 49 years old. Savannah was 16 and about to begin her senior year of high school. Nancy was 46, alone, responsible for 3 children, and facing a future that looked nothing like anything she had planned or prepared for. The family has described what happened next with enormous respect and love for the woman at the center of it. She did not fall apart. She held the family together. She set aside whatever grief she was carrying in private and made sure her children could move forward. Savannah has spoken about this in multiple interviews and in her 2024 book, describing how her mother demonstrated her faith and resilience through action rather than words, and how she worked every day to keep the family intact. Both Savannah and Annie chose to attend college close to home, specifically because they did not want their mother to be alone in that house. The family reorganized itself around Nancy, and it worked, producing a military officer, a poet, and one of the most prominent journalists in American broadcasting. Nancy began working at the University of Arizona in 1990, where she served for 17 years, first as spokeswoman for University Medical Center, and then as an associate to the Vice President of University Advancement. She ran a program called Center Stage that brought musicians to the hospital monthly to perform for staff, patients, and visitors. That role tells you a great deal about who she was and what she valued. She believed that beauty and culture belonged to everyone, not just to those who could seek them out. And she built something that brought them to people in the hardest moments of their lives. She attended church every single Sunday. She kept Christian journals. She gave her children CDs of hymns to play for their own families. The day she went missing, her absence from church was the first sign that something was wrong. It was so far outside the pattern of her life that the people who knew her understood immediately that whatever had happened, it had not been her choice. The night she vanished. The last confirmed sighting of Nancy Guthrie before her disappearance followed a completely ordinary day. On the evening of Saturday, January 31st, 2026, she took an Uber to her daughter Annie's home for dinner with the family. She was dropped off at her own home on North Camino Escalante in the Catalina foothills at approximately 9:50 in the evening by her son-in-law, Tommaso Tioni. The garage door opened. The garage door closed. That was the last confirmed moment anyone outside her home knew she was safe. The following morning, Sunday, February 1st, Nancy did not appear at church. The people who knew her recognized immediately that something was wrong. When they could not reach her, a welfare check was requested. Officers from the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrived at the house and discovered evidence that something violent and deliberate had taken place there. Blood was found at the scene. DNA testing quickly confirmed it was Nancy's. The sheriff, Chris Nanos, stated publicly and directly that he believed Nancy had been abducted. This was not a case of someone wandering off or having a medical emergency. Evidence at the scene indicated she had been taken against her will from inside her own home, the home she had lived in for decades, in a quiet neighborhood that neighbors described as having had virtually no serious crime in all the years they had lived there. Doorbell camera footage captured the most chilling evidence available in the early days of the investigation. A masked man, wearing a balaclava and carrying what appeared to be a holstered firearm and a 25-liter backpack, approached Nancy's front door and deliberately tampered with the camera. He covered it with his gloved hand. When that did not fully obstruct the view, he pulled a plant from the garden and used it to block the camera entirely. This was not an impulsive act. This was someone who had planned what he was doing, who knew that cameras existed, and who had come prepared to deal with them. The FBI released the footage publicly to generate tips and identify the suspect. The case exploded into national news almost immediately. The Pima County Sheriff's Department launched an investigation with assistance from the FBI, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and multiple search and rescue teams. Thousands of tips poured in. Canines searched the desert terrain surrounding the house. Investigators canvassed the neighborhood, reviewed surveillance footage from roadside cameras and nearby businesses, analyzed cell tower data, and began what would become a months-long forensic process. Savannah Guthrie stepped away from her NBC duties, including coverage of the 2026 Winter Olympics opening ceremonies, to return to Tucson, be with her family, and participate in the search. The decision to leave work and be present was fully supported by her employers, with Hoda Kotb and others stepping in to cover her responsibilities on the Today Show. Her absence from television underlined for millions of viewers just how serious the situation was. Then, what happened next was nothing anyone would have expected. What were the events that unfolded? The ransom demands, and what they revealed. Within days of the disappearance, the investigation took a turn that nobody had anticipated. Ransom notes began arriving, but they did not go to the family. They went to television stations. The local CBS affiliate, KOLD in Tucson, received a letter. TMZ received multiple communications. The notes demanded payment in cryptocurrency, including one that reportedly demanded $6 million, with a deadline of 5 in the afternoon on February 9, 2026. The unusual choice of destination for the ransom communications, to media outlets rather than to law enforcement or directly to the family, struck investigators and commentators as irregular. It suggested either a perpetrator who was unfamiliar with how ransom negotiations typically work, or someone deliberately trying to create public pressure on the family through media attention, or something else entirely that investigators were working to understand. On February 5th, a California man was arrested on federal charges for posing as the abductor and making ransom demands to the Guthrie family. Authorities were careful to state that his scheme was entirely separate from the other ransom notes that had received widespread media coverage. The existence of a separate fraudulent ransom attempt layered on top of what appeared to be real communications made the investigative picture considerably more complicated. Savannah and her siblings responded to the ransom demands in a series of deeply emotional videos posted to social media. In one video, Savannah looked directly into the camera and said that the family was ready to talk, that they needed proof their mother was alive, and that they were ready to listen to whoever was responsible. In a follow-up video, she said simply and directly that the family would pay. Her voice was steady. Her face showed the specific kind of controlled anguish that belongs to people who know that any sign of falling apart might make things worse. Her brother Cameron addressed the kidnapper or kidnappers directly in one of the family's video statements, saying that whoever was holding their mother should know the family wanted to hear from them. Her sister Annie was also present for multiple statements. The three siblings were united in public, presenting themselves as a family devastated but not broken, capable and willing to do whatever was necessary to bring their mother home. The FBI announced an initial reward of $50,000 for information about Nancy's whereabouts. The family subsequently offered $1 million of their own money for information that could assist in her recovery. By February 9th, the deadline set in one of the ransom notes had passed without any confirmed exchange. The investigation continued. No suspect was charged. No proof of life was received by the family that met the verification requirements. The case moved from an acute crisis phase into the longer, harder, more uncertain phase of a search that had produced no confirmed resolution. But how did a single alleged photograph and a cryptic handwritten message become the most talked-about rumor connected to the case? The secret life story that shook her family. In the weeks after Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, a story began circulating online that has never been confirmed by law enforcement or by the Guthrie family, but that attracted enormous attention from the people following the case. According to the story, an envelope arrived in the days after Nancy vanished, containing a faded photograph from 1992 showing Nancy standing arm in arm with an unidentified man. On the back of the photograph, in handwriting that did not belong to anyone in the family, were 6 words. She deserved more than secrets. Ask about Elena. The claim that emerged from that alleged photograph was extraordinary. It suggested that Nancy Guthrie had been living a second life for more than 30 years under the name Elena Ramirez in Santa Fe, New Mexico, that she had maintained a relationship there, that she had opened a bank account under that name, used a post office box for correspondence, and paid for everything in cash to avoid leaving a digital trail. That in Tucson, she was the devoted widow and grandmother, and in Santa Fe, she was a different version of herself entirely. An artist and free spirit who sold desert landscape paintings under pseudonyms and lived with a freedom that her life in Arizona did not allow. The story describes a locked box kept under Nancy's bed in Tucson, reportedly containing letters and photographs from her life as Elena, which was allegedly missing from the crime scene after her disappearance. It describes wire transfers to Mexico that investigators were supposedly scrutinizing. It describes an emotional moment when Savannah and her siblings were told the details of the alleged second life, with Savannah struggling to maintain composure, and Annie reportedly whispering that their mother had had a whole other life. None of these claims have been verified by law enforcement. The Guthrie family has not confirmed any of this. The sources for the story as it circulated online are not law enforcement officials or named journalists from established news organizations. The story spread widely through social media and through websites that aggregate unverified claims about active investigations. It is the kind of narrative that emerges in high-profile cases where the public is desperate for explanation and where the actual facts provided by investigators are limited. What is true is that Nancy Guthrie was a deeply private person. Her daughter, Savannah, in an on-air tribute for her mother's 80th birthday in 2022, described her as someone who met unthinkable challenges with grit, without self-pity, with determination, and always with unshakable faith. She said her mother showed her children how to be consistent, faithful, and truthful. These are the qualities the family has consistently described across years of public statements about a woman who rarely sought the spotlight herself. Whether any version of a secret life was real, whether the envelope with the photograph existed, whether Elena Ramirez was a name Nancy ever used, is something the investigation has not confirmed. What the case made unmistakably clear is that Nancy Guthrie was a woman whose interior life was her own, shared on her own terms, and that the people who loved her most are now navigating the grief of not knowing what happened to her alongside the more complicated grief of wondering whether there were things about her they did not know. And as the speculation continues to circulate outside official channels, the investigation itself remains grounded in one unavoidable fact: the investigation that has produced no answers. As of early April 2026, Nancy Guthrie has still not been found. More than 2 months after her disappearance, the investigation remains active and ongoing. The Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI maintain a task force of approximately 20 to 24 people dedicated to the case, split roughly equally between the two agencies. The DNA found at the scene, confirmed as Nancy's, is still being analyzed alongside other genetic evidence gathered during the investigation. DNA recovered from gloves found near the property did not match any profile in CODIS, the national DNA database maintained by the FBI. Investigators have pursued forensic genetic genealogy as an alternative avenue for identifying the suspect. Cell tower data, surveillance footage from thousands of cameras across the area, and digital forensic evidence from Nancy's home are all part of the investigative picture that law enforcement has so far been unable to use to identify a suspect. New notes claiming knowledge of Nancy's location appeared as recently as early April 2026, this time demanding half a Bitcoin in exchange for information about where her body was located. The legitimacy of those notes had not been determined as of the time of the most recent reporting. Earlier in the investigation, Savannah Guthrie clarified in an interview that while some of the purported ransom notes were fake, she believed the two that she and her siblings had directly responded to were genuine. The Pima County Sheriff himself has faced criticism from some members of the community over the handling of the investigation. A recall effort was launched against Sheriff Chris Nanos in the weeks following the disappearance. The Pima County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to open an investigation into his conduct in connection with the case. The public pressure on law enforcement has been significant and sustained, fed in part by the enormous media interest in the case and by online communities that have formed to follow its developments. Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show on April 6, 2026, her first appearance in more than 2 months. When the show opened, she said simply that the family was glad viewers had started the week with them and that it was good to be home. Her co-host Craig Melvin told her it was good to have her back. She then read the news. Before stepping back, she had told her audience in an emotional video that her family was blowing on the embers of hope and still believed their mother would come home. Whether that hope has been sustained by anything concrete has not been made clear. President Donald Trump called Savannah directly on February 4th to express his personal support and offer additional federal resources. The White House posted information about Nancy Guthrie on its social media accounts, urging the public to report any relevant information. The case attracted attention at the highest levels of the American government and media simultaneously, which reflects both the fame of Savannah Guthrie and the particular horror of what happened. An elderly woman, alone, taken from her own home in the night by someone who had clearly planned carefully. What do you think happened on that night in Tucson? And do you think the investigation will eventually find answers for this family? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.